How's it going, fellow cinephiles? This is Dominic from Film Overload, the channel where we talk about movies, pop culture, and everything in between. Yes, I know, sorry for the lack of posts lately, just life has been pretty busy, but we are back with another video, and hopefully this video will be the start of something new for this channel and maybe stir some conversation among you fellow subscribers and viewers. Today, I thought it would be fun and kind of dive into my personal tastes in film. And today I thought, why not start with the top 10 worst movies that I have ever seen in my life. Every single movie on this list is here for a reason, and I'm going to go into why it's on this particular list. So let's get into it, shall we? So starting off this list at number 10, we have the abomination of a film, and that is F4 or Fantastic Four, if you even want to call it Fantastic Four, directed by Josh Trank. And let me tell you, talk about a disrespectful film to Stan and Jack's original source material. This movie is awful. I remember when it came out, the trailers looked awful. It just looked despicable. It looked absolutely despicable, and it was. The story was awful. The script was even worse. The direction was horrific. The acting was horrible, mainly due to the writing. But this movie, it was just awful. And I remember when it came out, it just got review bombed, and for good reason, because this movie is awful. I have seen it once and never again. Like, it's that bad. Don't believe me? Turn on Disney Plus and just sit through it. Please. It's awful. So at number 9, we have another superhero film, and one that may be a little bit lower on the list than you all are probably expecting, but number 9 for me is Batman and Robin. Yes, I know there is a lot of just pure chaos in this movie. Everything about this movie is bad. I wouldn't say every single element of this film is bad, but the bad parts of it greatly overshadow the small crumbs of good that this movie produces. It's just all over the place. The whole Batman, Robin, Batgirl story was just a mess. You know, Schwarzenegger saying all of his awful one-liners. We get Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy and just a awful iteration of Bane, and just this movie is just a walking disaster. And it's just, I really don't know how this film got made, but oh my goodness, it's just a disaster. And again, just another movie that just was just a really awful experience watching for the first time. All right, at number 8, we have a horror movie, actually, for number 8. And this movie I was really looking forward to when I first saw the trailer. When this came out, you know, I really dug the universe that this movie takes place in, and the build up to this film I thought was really solid. And when I walked out of the theater of this film, I was like, wow, this movie is complete garbage. And that is The Nun. This movie, again, it does not deserve to be a part of the Conjuring universe. I know The Nun is kind of a big deal in the Conjuring universe. However, The Nun does not feel like any other of the Conjuring films, which I personally really enjoy. The Nun feels distant and really not necessary at all. Like, it really did not need to be made. The Nun was cool kind of in the background, like in passing and in certain characters mentioning about certain things. But this film did not need to be made, and it proves so. This movie is, again, a walking disaster. The story is awful. The script is awful. everything about this movie can just go bye-bye. At number 7, we have another superhero film. Yes, there's a few superhero films on this list, but it has to be that way in my opinion. And at number 7, we have another movie that had no business being made considering the circumstances of this particular character, and that is the Black Widow movie. This film had no business being made. The character was already dead because of the effects and the events of Avengers Endgame. This movie came out after Endgame. Why did this movie come out after Endgame? This movie should have came out after Civil War. If you really think about it, this movie should have came out right after Civil War. But no, why wait after the events of Avengers Endgame to release a movie about a dead character? And that's not my only gripe about this movie. This movie is awful. Directed horribly, written horribly. Scarlett Johansson tries her best to save this film, but it just doesn't work. The Red Guardian was just a joke. Her sister is annoying. Just everything about this film is awful, in my opinion. And I just absolutely hated this movie. And that told me the direction of Marvel and where they were headed. And I'm happy that I left the MCU after Endgame because, oh boy, that was a big indicator. At number 6, we have another movie that had no business being made at all. This movie came out at the wrong time. Just everything just did not pan out well for this film, and that is the film Home Sweet Home Alone. Look, Home Alone is a great film. The first one is fantastic. The second movie is good. Is it as good as the first one? That's debatable. The third one was awful, and this one is even worse. Again, it had no business being made. They just made the movie to use the IP name Home Alone and try and make a couple of dollars off of it. There was a couple of neat little cameos here and there, but this movie, again, wrong time, just wrong everything. And the movie isn't even that funny. It's just super, super cringy, which is why it's number 6 on this list. Now, number 5 has 2 movies. I could not pick between one or the other, so number 5 will be a combination of 2 films. And both films, in my opinion, almost made me quit watching movies. I mean that with my whole heart and my whole soul. These 2 movies legitimately almost made me quit watching movies, and that is the Amazon Cinderella movie and Space Jam New Legacy. Let's start with Cinderella, shall we? Amazon somehow found a way to absolutely girl boss Cinderella so bad that it literally ruined the entirety of this movie. Everything is just awful about this movie. Everything. Amazon, I don't know what the heck they were thinking with this film. And then you have Space Jam Legacy, a sequel that had no business being made. No one cared about a sequel to the already really good first Space Jam with Michael Jordan. It was essentially a 2-hour advertisement for HBO Max, and that just was not fun, and it got really stale really fast. So these 2 films are my number 5. At number 4, we have a horror movie once again, and it is a continuation or a reboot or a remake of whatever you want to call this, but it is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2022. Listen, I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The first movie is amazing. I enjoy the sequels, but they're not as good as the first film. So I went into this movie going, oh, okay, another Texas Chainsaw movie. It can't be that bad, right? Well, Netflix found a way to really, and I mean really, mess this up. This movie is a true abomination. I mean, truly, it's an abomination. It doesn't even feel like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. It just feels like a fan fiction of what a Texas Chainsaw movie would look like to them. It's literally just a fan fiction of Texas Chainsaw, in my opinion. It's just awful. I don't recommend it. It's terrible. It's one of, if not the worst horror movies that I have ever seen. Once again, I'm combining two films for my number 3. And my number 3, once again, there's two films, or a set of films, I should say. There's a little teaser for it right there. But my number 3 is a tie between Tom Hooper's Cats and the Kissing Booth trilogy. Let's start with the Kissing Booth trilogy, shall we? This trilogy of films is awful. And I mean awful. Awful, cringy, eye-rolling, typical, just everything about this screams early 2000s rom-com, and it just does not work at all. This is arguably one of the worst trilogies of all time. And then you have Tom Hooper's Cats. Dude, how do you go from making a Best Picture winner like The King's Speech and you make a film with CGI butts? I mean, CGI buttholes. I mean, really? Dude, what happened? Seriously. Cats was a experience. It was an experience. And it's an experience I will never forget for all the wrong reasons. So, Cats and the Kissing Booth trilogy are tied for my number 3. So we are down to the last two films on this list, and my last two films might be somewhat controversial, but I don't care. This is how I feel, and it may not be how you feel, but that's okay, because that's the beautiful part about movies and television. It is a very subjective medium. So I'm just going to come out and say this right now. The second worst film I have ever seen is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Let's see, how do I put this politely? Brought back Emperor Palpatine for no reason, made Rey a Palpatine, so technically the bad guys technically won because Palpatine's blood is literally still alive. You ruined Kylo Ren by turning him good. You completely just make the entire Princess Leia character arc just completely awkward. Rey is still just this unstoppable force for no reason. Finn is still crying out Rey's name. Poe is just a meaningless character. There is so much awful stuff in this movie, and they just... What a way to end the Star Wars saga, the Skywalker saga, so to speak. It ended on such a whimper, and I remember this so well. The night that this movie came out, I was there. And when Rey calls herself a Skywalker, I kid you not, guys, my entire theater literally let out the biggest sigh you have ever heard. And people legitimately rolled their eyes through the entirety of the credits. And people just left in silence because it was that awful. This movie is just terrible and a really awful way to end such a great saga. And speaking of Star Wars, the worst film that I have ever seen is the movie that came out before Episode 9, believe it or not. And that is Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. And you know what? I don't have to explain anything. Y'all already know what makes this film bad, and you already know what it does to the entirety of the Star Wars universe. So I don't need to explain anything because I'm assuming you all know exactly what this film did that completely negated everything that came before it. So those are the worst films I have ever seen. And guys, if you do enjoy these films or some of these films that were on this list, that's okay. Because again, that's the beautiful part of movies. They're so subjective and it creates such great and rich conversations. And so you may not agree with my list, and that's okay. These are just how I feel about these films and how I viewed them. So if you want to see more content like this and other forms of content, be sure to hit that like button. Also hit subscribe while you're at it and turn on the post notifications so that you guys can get notified every single time that I post a video. You can follow me on Letterboxd, which is right here. I post all of my movie reviews on Letterboxd as it helps me keep track of movies that I have watched, movies that I haven't watched, and movies that I will watch. And I think you guys would benefit greatly from this app and this website if you are indeed lovers of cinema like myself. As always, guys, happy movie watching. Take care.